You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 98. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Welcome back to the Tricorder Transmissions. This is episode number 98, Gold Key Comics number 18. Tonight we are going to be talking The Hijacked Planet, and Mr. Craig Cohen is back in the saddle again. Craig, how's it going?
It's very good, very good. Thank you. And a big thank you to Chris for holding things down while I was away on assignment.
Well, you're welcome.
Chris is here as well, as you guys can tell, and I'm Jeff Hewlett, as always. So this is a historic event. This is the first comic where we have 3 chairs going at once. So, Mr. Chris Ritzer, you're going to be in the 3rd chair this evening.
Thanks for having me on again.
Always a pleasure. So, we've had some great feedback from the listeners on the last few episodes, so thanks a lot, guys, for listening. And I think Heather Barker is even in on these Gold Key comics now. I saw her tweet earlier about having started listening to the saga, so that's really cool to have her on board as well. She's the co-host of the new Shore Leave series, so pretty awesome. So we're going to dive right into this now. We're still with this new writer, Arnold Drake. This is his 2nd Gold Key comic. The artist is still the same. It's Alberto Giolitti, and the inks are by Giovanni Tisi once again. Cover art by George Wilson. So this was published in May of 1973. We are at 32 pages, and star date is 3248.6, which is, again, sometime in the 2260s. So are you guys ready to jump into this comic?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, let's go.
All right, we're going to give you guys the countdown. We're going to start talking the issue, so if you want to stop and read it and not have anything spoiled, do so now. Otherwise, we are going to start talking about this issue in 3, 2, 1. All right, so we're going to start talking with the cover, as we always do, and I really thought this was a really cool cover. It's very sci-fi. It's got Mr. Spock. He's kind of standing behind this guy who looks a little like Doctor Strange, and he's like holding the pistol to like what looks like a planet, and there's some kind of weird ray gun shooting a group of people and melting buildings in the background, so it looks like some kind of devastation. So, Craig Cohen, did you dig this cover?
Yeah, ever since they went to this sort of pulp art concept for the covers, I've enjoyed every one, and they seem to have gotten better and better.
Yes, there's a little tagline here at the bottom. I agree with you. There's a tagline that says, "Biomagnetic tape, lifeblood of a dying planet is hijacked." I wasn't kind of sure what biomagnetic tape is, but we'll find out as we go. Chris, what were your thoughts on this cover and that tagline?
Yeah, I was definitely a little confused by the biomagnetic tape. I'm like, that's something I've never heard of, and I guess I'll find out what it is. So that kind of piqued my interest. And I really thought with how the first thing I actually noticed was Spock. It looked like he was going to go for the nerve pinch in the cover here.
Yeah.
And I was really hoping for a nerve pinch, and we don't get a nerve pinch. But that's all right.
Eventually we'll get it again. Eventually it'll be there, but I guess we just got to hold on a little bit longer. Did you guys think that guy that Spock is creeping up behind kind of looks like a Doctor Strange sort of character?
Oh, I totally see it.
Yep.
So let's see. Inside, we flip open the cover and we've got our normal splash page. And the first thing I noticed about this splash page was that the colors in this one seem really bold in comparison to some of the previous issues that seem more washed out to me. I don't know if they got some better inking technology going on or just the inker himself is so much better, but you've got all 3 TOS shirt colors represented here, plus the villain is wearing this kind of green, kind of Robin Hood looking kind of outfit. And he's the same villain from the cover, and he's got a miniaturized looking planet thing he's holding. It looks like he's going to be vaporizing it. There's some setup text here that reads, "One man without military might or even the economic power of a nation behind him is about to take possession of an entire world. Mr. Spock, second in command of the Starship Enterprise, can stop him. But incredibly, the cool and emotionless Mr. Spock will be betrayed by something he never knew he possessed, his own emotions.
Ugh.
Ooh.
These stingers are getting me more and more frustrated because this one, it's a straight up lie.
That's true.
I mean, we never see this scenario in the issue.
Yeah, it never happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to spoil what's going to happen later on here, but you're right. So it's teasing something that never happens. It's also teasing something, implying something about Mr. Spock that doesn't necessarily happen either. So interesting. So do you guys, I guess we know what Craig thinks, but Chris, do you think this splash page is particularly effective? I don't think it was effective as some of the previous ones.
No, not really. Yeah, outside of I think getting the colors of the uniforms right, yeah, I don't think it was too effective.
Yeah, I think the last issue, remember we talked a lot about it setting up the mystery that didn't pay off until later in the issue. It's a shame that we don't seem to get that again in this issue. Although I was intrigued by that planet-looking thing the guy's holding in his hand because he's threatening to destroy all life on this planet. So you don't really know if is that a miniature planet or what exactly that is in his hand. So I guess that's kind of a mystery.
Yeah.
So, all right, we are going to dive into talking about the story here. And it starts off a little differently than some of the prior comics, which I thought was pretty cool. So the Enterprise is getting sent to a planet called Styra. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It could be Styra or Styra, whose population is in danger due to a star, the primary star, a sun in its solar system, beginning to erupt, getting a little closer and closer to the planet. So while they're proceeding to the planet, we are introduced to a new type of recreation that's happening on the ship. Scotty and a red-headed crew member that he's quite fond of are playing a game called Zap Ball. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Scotty winds up winning and starts to kind of get a little makeout session going on with this girl, and Mr. Spock barges in and catches Scotty in the act. He's a little bit PO'd because Scotty was supposed to be on the bridge for his scheduled post, which is a little bit odd since Scotty's an engineer. I don't know why he'd be on the bridge, but Scotty replies that he got Sulu to fill in for him, and Spock reminds Scotty that that's an unauthorized exchange of duties, and it is specifically forbidden under Article 118 of his general orders. It's pretty specific. And tells him that there's an emergency session that has been called of all the top brass on the ship, and the two travel into the briefing room where Kirk and McCoy are sitting there waiting for him. So once everyone arrives, Kirk whips out a videotape that has some secret orders for the Enterprise regarding something called Project Atlas. So on this tape, there's the leader of a Federation Science Council telling them that their mission is to transport the entire planet of Styra to a new location. We're introduced to a character by the name of Dr. Langu. This is a hard one. Dr. Lanugu. I'm not sure if that's even right. Yeah, well, whatever. He's a greenish kind of alien with some pointed ears. Almost looks kind of Vulcan-ish. And outlines the plan that they're going to be using this biomagnetic recording technology that's going to allow them to record all of the details about every living organism and thing on that planet, and it's going to be stored in some sort of a tape crystal type formation. Once the information has been stored, the crystal can be put into what they call a retransmuter, which will restore everything back exactly as it was recorded. So it's almost like putting a planet into like a transporter beam and then like rematerializing the whole thing somewhere else. So they are going to give a little demonstration here about what this thing is capable of. Kirk has this crystal in his pocket and sticks it into the retransmuter, and lo and behold, a large black dog appears on the countertop and begins to molest Mr. Spock. So Dr. Lanugu tells them that they are currently in the process of doing this with all of the living things on planet Styra, and by the time they get there, they will all be bio-recording. So, and the final act of this Project Atlas will be the recording of the actual planet itself. So Kirk tells Spock that Atlas has been kept top secret because the slightest bit of interference could destroy every living thing on the planet. And just at that moment, an identified vehicle shows up on the scanner. So we will pull the car over here and start talking about this. So I thought this was pretty interesting, you guys. We start off with a small supplemental captain's log talking about how these eruptions first started to be recorded on this planet, and they refer to it as Star System 83. So interesting little bit of expose at the beginning. Chris, what did you think?
Yeah, I thought this was a pretty cool way to start the issue. Yeah, getting a bunch of backstory on what's going on, so they get you up to speed really quick on the whole plight of the planet that they're going to have to save.
So Craig, I thought this was really interesting because we've gone through the entire original series in our commentaries, and I don't believe that we've ever seen the inner workings of Starfleet or any kind of Starfleet council in session. So is this a first that we're witnessing?
I think so, but it doesn't forgive the fact that I don't really like it, because for me, it betrays the standard setup that we normally get with a captain's log. And this one, he goes into, I don't even know how to describe it. He goes from explaining their situation to all of a sudden we get a flashback.
Yeah, I guess you have to kind of compress the whole setup into a very short little span to leave enough issue left to get the whole story out, maybe.
Yeah, but then, I mean, we kind of get that when they get the communication from Starfleet, so it almost seemed like redundant information.
Oh, yeah, it's a good way to look at it. I didn't think of it that way either. So one thing I do like, though, is that it seems that this author, this Arnold Drake, we've had a couple of authors before this. We had Dick Wood and Len Wein, but it seems to me that Arnold Drake is really kind of going out there and being really bold with his universe building and kind of creating his own comic book canon. So he's got this whole Project Atlas thing going on. He's got the Federation Science Council with he's introduced a couple of prominent doctors. There's Dr. Klieg, who he's kind of like a tall green guy. He's bald. He's got some pale green skin. And that Dr. Langudu, or whatever, however you pronounce his name, Langugu, another council member who kind of looks Vulcan with like a comb over. So I kind of like that this author is really taking his own pen to this and kind of creating a deeper universe than we already had coming into this. Chris, you've done a lot of Trek reading. Is this something that other authors do?
Yeah, every author sort of puts their own spin on it like that. And one thing I noticed this author's been doing, he's just been sort of relentless with Scotty here. He's getting just shut down every single issue with this guy. Just the running joke continues.
Yeah, the other thing about the whole Scotty situation is, I know, Jeff, during our original series proper discussions, we talked about what Trek would be like if it was made today, and the kind of serial continuity-based nature that we get. And this comic seems to kind of be doing that with this whole introduction of Scotty as this champion player. But again, it doesn't really add to the issue at all. It almost seems like filler.
No, yeah, the Zap Ball thing does seem to be kind of like a filler, and I'm glad you brought that up, because I wanted to quickly give the audience here an idea of what this Zap Ball thing looks like. It kind of looks almost like a racquetball court to me, and they've got these cone-like things in their hands, and they're kind of shooting the balls against the wall, and I guess they have to, try to catch them or deflect them or something of that nature. But the comic implies that Scotty is the best Zap Ball player on the ship. So I like the fact that he's trying to inject some, recreational activities into this, because you rarely see anything like that on the show. I mean, we know they had some kind of wrestling gymnasium, and I think there was some reference to a bowling alley on the ship at one point.
Yeah.
But you don't really ever get much in the line of more personal moments where they're just kind of not on duty and they're just kind of having a good time. So I don't know if that works for either one of you.
Well, it was something that, if you look at the later shows, The Next Generation definitely embraced that. And I think it's a concept that really works for Star Trek, but in this issue, it doesn't really serve any purpose. And, maybe going forward, we're going to start seeing this over the course of the Gold Key series, and maybe it'll give me a little bit better perspective once that's done. But I mean, in a vacuum, this issue, the sequence doesn't really make much sense.
I guess the only way you can really make sense out of that Zap Ball thing is just more of a setup to make Spock and Scotty's relationship, their tense relationship that seemed to come out of nowhere in the last issue, make that continue into this issue.
I tell you what, man, everyone in this issue too, last issue was just Spock that was always yelling. In this issue, everyone yells every single line. Every single line ends with an exclamation point. It's what is wrong with these people? Like too much caffeine or something? I mean, they really need to chill out. I mean, they need a counselor on this ship ASAP.
Or get some Romulan ale distributed.
Yeah, or that.
Throughout the crew. I didn't notice all those exclamation points, so I'm glad that you brought that up. Did you pick that up, Craig?
No, but looking at it now, that is very funny. That must have been something the writer was exploring stylistically, and as Chris pointed out, it's absurd.
So everyone has a great sense of urgency. So we did get an actual proper captain's log, although we did start off with the supplemental. We got a proper one here, and it says, Stardate 3248.6, under AAA, in parentheses, highest priority, orders of the Supreme Council of the United Federation of Planets, we are proceeding at maximum speed to planet Styra. So I like that they name dropped the United Federation of Planets there, although I never realized they had a Supreme Council before. Chris, is that something that's ever mentioned anywhere else?
No, I don't think so. Maybe... I don't know. There's always sort of been like a Federation Council, like some of the main planets, I guess, with the representatives, but it's never really, I don't know, I've never heard referred to that way.
So before we move on, any final thoughts on this introductory part?
This seems like something they would have done on a Star Trek episode, but the whole premise still seems problematic to me, and I don't want to say it sort of starts to infringe on the Prime Directive, but it kind of speaks to an overall idea that I'm uncomfortable with.
I'm with you because I was thinking to myself while I was reading this, did everybody on that planet consent to that?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a really big risk to take, and I have a couple more notes after this next part that it made me really think more deeply into this. And I know we've had deep discussions about procedures that are done to people in Trek episodes and how invasive and inconvenient and impersonal a lot of them are. So this really kind of stuck out to me as one of those things where, I mean, that they would really kind of have to get really good legal signed documents from every single person on this planet before they just started shooting them all with this bio recording gun. But all right, so moving along, the spaceship that they detected and weren't able to communicate with turns out to be a very small emergency size craft. So not a huge spaceship, or it wasn't Klingons like we might have thought it would be. But Spock does something that I thought was very interesting. He puts on a spacesuit, and instead of beaming over, he puts on a spacesuit and kind of does a spacewalk with a tether line attached to the Enterprise all the way over to the abandoned spacecraft, all by himself. He finds a hatch, he goes inside, he finds a half-naked blonde woman laying on the floor. She's got some sort of, looks almost like a stage costume on of some sort. And she's alive, but kind of mumbling to herself, calling out for help. And Spock puts a spacesuit on the woman and carries her out into space and floats back over to the Enterprise. And when he gets back, he hands her over to Dr. McCoy. And Kirk seems to recognize her from somewhere and says as much to Dr. McCoy while she's laying unconscious in sickbay. So later on, she wakes up, and Spock begins to question her about what she was doing in this tiny little ship so deep into space. He says that her name is Allura, and she was trying to reach the nearest space station. So she used to be some sort of a stage performer. She had a partner named Anzar who... together, they used to play gigs on what they call backwater planets, where Anzar would also wind up getting in trouble for some of his shady criminal schemes that he would come up with to make extra money. So finally, she got tired of it and left him when she realized he was in the middle of plotting a very big scheme that she thought he was kind of getting in over his head on. So Spock tells her that he knew from the moment he climbed into her ship that she had uncommon courage. And she thanks him with an embrace. And once again, just as somebody's about to get some, they're disturbed. Kirk walks in this time and tells them that they've arrived at planet Styra. So again, we'll stop here really quick. And first thing I noticed, guys, is that the spacesuits in this comic do not match the spacesuits that we saw on the original series. Craig, did you notice that too?
Oh yeah, totally. The ones on the series were really designed to not obscure the actors' faces, so you could get those moments where you have an episode where William Shatner is fully suited up for the entire episode, but you still get to see that it's William Shatner. With that said, though, and I don't want to cut into Chris's comments, I think the page where Spock travels from the Enterprise to the other ship is a wonderful, wonderful page. It's a beautiful example of sequential art at its best, and it's really just a wonderful sequence, and it's a page that I just love looking at.
I completely agree. I was very taken by the large panel where Spock is flying back to the ship with the woman in his arms. I thought the perspective of the Enterprise in the distance there and him kind of floating towards it was really cool, really compelling. Chris, did you like those frames as well?
Yeah, I didn't really think about it the way you guys did, and yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, it is a really good sequence there. Yeah, it's definitely different, and also it didn't even hit me either that he wasn't beaming over there. But yeah, it's a good opportunity in a medium like this to show a different way of doing things, and they did it really well here.
So one thing I thought was pretty cool too, and this is something that I don't think we ever heard of on the show, is that Spock knows Uhura's name because he read her identity disc.
Yes.
So that really kind of struck me as odd because we've never seen anything like that. So I assume that she was carrying a disc with her. Is that kind of like an interstellar driver's license, maybe, that it had her name imprinted on it? But she's only got one name, of course. She's like Madonna. She doesn't have a last name. So I guess that goes with being a stage actress. Did you guys like the concept of the identity disc?
It definitely seemed like something that would exist in that Star Trek universe.
Yeah, I figure I can go with that.
Okay. And they also introduce a new type of ship here. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's maybe called a Fiver. Fivver.
Yeah, maybe think of that website.
Oh, yeah, where you can get anybody to do anything for $5.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's apparently a short-range craft. Doesn't really look like anything we've seen before. It's kind of just a little sleek-looking, tiny little wedge shape. But they had enough forethought to give it an actual name, so maybe it's an actual type of ship.
I thought it was effective. It was, cool little concept, and it seemed to be in line with the type of ship we see on Star Trek.
So this is one thing that I kind of scratch my head at too, is that they kind of have a little bit of a flashback where we see Uhura on stage with her partner Anzar, and they go so far as to say he played an instrument called, and again, a broken record here, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, a budupaphone? Budupaphone, budupaphone. So it kind of looks like a large brass horn instrument that kind of wraps around his body, sort of like a big tuba, but a little bit thinner and sleeker looking than a tuba. It almost seems like another one of those throwaway moments, Craig.
Yeah.
I don't see much of a point to mentioning that instrument at all, and I think they do like a corny little joke sequence, which I didn't kind of get. Did you?
Well, that was the thing that actually sold that sequence for me.
Yeah, really? Yup. I read that. It was, that one had me laughing, actually.
So, any further thoughts on this sequence before we move along? Either one of you?
Nah, I don't think so.
No.
So, as they arrive at the planet, the last of the Styrians are undergoing their transmutations, and after they're done, a scanner in space near the planet does the final recording of the entire planet. So, we're back aboard the Enterprise. The Styrian leader is there and gives Spock a sphere, a small sphere that we recognize from the splash page and the cover. And he says that it contains the information of 600 million people. Spock takes that sphere and locks it in a vault, but not before showing it to Uhura. So Uhura and Spock begin to spend a great deal of time together. Spock even kind of forgets some of his duties and Kirk reams him out for not leaving the personnel reports on his desk 2 days in a row. Scotty and his red-haired girlfriend are kind of creeping around, and they're watching Spock, and Scotty calls Spock a lovesick cow, which I kind of didn't get. The Enterprise winds up getting attacked by a small craft, which fires some sort of a flare at the ship, which disables the Enterprise's video circuits for a very short time. They repair themselves automatically, and just when they get their visuals back, the little ship is flying away from the Enterprise at top speed, and they kind of couldn't figure out exactly what was going on. So an alert sounds, and Kirk and Spock discover that the vault in which Spock had placed the Styrian recordings is now empty, and of course, Allura is missing as well. So Spock and Kirk realize quickly that Allura was only there to get the sphere and steal it away, and that her shipwreck in space had been a phony setup. So Spock had placed a trap in the space hatch where she had run to catch her, but somehow she was able to blow the hatch open and escape out of the ship and getting out of Spock's well-laid trap. So now the Styrian sphere and all the people's recordings are now being held captive aboard the small ship that attacked the Enterprise. And this ends the first part of the issue. So Spock is a victim, or up until now we thought he was seemingly the victim of the love con that we've seen other members of the crew get caught in. So do either one of you like or dislike Spock's love con moments any better than, say, one of Kirk's from the series?
I hated it because nothing that Spock does here screams logical to me.
Yeah, exactly. Like, here's the big problem I have with this. Why is that Allura dame hanging out with Spock when this guy is handing him, like, the globe with all the people in the first place? She shouldn't be hanging out there. That's, like, classified information, I would think. But here's Spock just dragging her everywhere with him. It just really doesn't make much sense at all.
Oh, yeah, that's great because, we hear all of this stuff early on in the issue about Project Atlas being this super AAA top secret thing. So, but you know what? This wouldn't be the first time they've let a guest on the Enterprise be part of very secured operations. I think we've seen that quite a few times on the show. So not too much of a surprise, but you'd think Spock would be smarter than that, especially when he was lecturing Scotty about regulations earlier in the issue.
Mm-hmm. And also, it doesn't make any sense to set up this elaborate trap. I mean, if you have suspicions, you limit her movements. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why would you let her run free on the ship if you suspected that she was going to steal that little sphere anyway? Why wouldn't they lock her in or confine her to quarters or something?
Yeah, I mean, Spock doesn't need to showcase how smart he is.
Yeah, he should have just handed her over to security and said, "We'll hold you there until we get to the next starbase and drop you off."
Yep.
But so, this is where I was having some questions about, the Styrian people getting transferred onto these recordings. So, I mean, you see that there's a Styrian guy on the ship handing Spock the sphere. So who gets to actually ride on the Enterprise to the new location of the planet, and who has to get squished into the tapes? How do they make those decisions?
Yeah, I think this is the only guy that I think this dude won the lottery, and he's probably the only one.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, wouldn't you want to be the guy that rides on the Enterprise, or the group of people that rides on the Enterprise? I would feel really bad. If my friends and family got squished onto the tapes and I got to win the lottery and ride on the ship.
Well, this even sets up a problem with the issue later, where they basically, I don't want to get into spoiling the end of the issue, but do you think any of the billionaires on that planet would do that? Why wouldn't they just use their own resources to relocate themselves?
Yeah, wouldn't you think it'd be like a Krypton scenario? Where all the rich people are getting into ships and flying away and leave all the poor people behind to die on the planet, right?
Yeah.
That would be a real Star Trek thing to do. That could have been the real controversy. Social commentary. What do you think, Chris?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Page 13, panel number 3. This struck me as very, very odd. So Kirk orders them to fire a warning shot at the unidentified ship. That seems a little un-Kirk-like to me. I mean, we've seen them chasing ships around before, and it seems weird that Kirk would risk firing a shot at a ship that he didn't know was hostile or not. Did that stick out to you guys?
Oh, totally.
Yeah. Oh, this was really cool. There's a Charlie Brown moment in here for Kirk on page 14, panel 1. Kirk says, "Good grief." So at page 11, panel 3, too, I thought was interesting because you got this huge laser gun thing that's transmuting all these people, this really high-tech, top-secret thing, but the guys that are operating it are wearing wired headphones. Isn't this the future? We have wireless headphones now. Why are they wearing wired headphones? I don't know. So the Enterprise is contacted very shortly thereafter by Anzar, Alura's old partner, who is the perpetrator of this crime. He appears on the view screen, and of course, Allura is in the background behind him, as we expected. So he demands 100 million credits be deposited into his account within 24 hours, or he is going to destroy the orb that contains all 600 million Styrian lives and their planet. Using a secure scrambling device, the Enterprise relays this message back to the Federation Council. The Council deliberates and decides to take whatever measures are necessary, except they do not want to pay the blackmail in order to save Styria. So Kirk is left to his own devices to try to retrieve this the information. So Kirk tells Ansar that he feels the terms are acceptable, but they need to work out the details in person. So Ansar agrees to meet Kirk and Spock in a place called the Great Cave of Lurota at noon the following day. Kirk and Spock beam down into the cave where Ansar is waiting, and he tells Kirk that he will not negotiate, and he will take no less than 100 million credits in jewels and the rarest of metals, no cash. So Kirk tells Ansar that he never meant to negotiate, and the best that he can hope for is his life to be spared. Kirk draws his phaser and attempts to take a shot, but Ansar has some henchmen located around the cave, and Kirk and Spock are quickly overwhelmed. As they attempt to flee deeper into the cave, they start to split up to explore to try to find a way out. Kirk taking the left and Spock taking the right. So they both run into dead ends and are captured. So the gunmen take Spock into a small cavern where he is tied up and given some food to eat. And once the guard leaves, Allura shows up and starts to apologize to Spock, saying that Ansar is actually her brother and that he's mentally ill, and she feels that she needs to protect him so he doesn't wind up in jail. Spock asks her if she will try to convince her brother to surrender. She agrees to try. Ansar does not want to do it and instead demands more payment, so Spock decides to try to become a double agent and tries to get Ansar to comply with a brand new plan, since he will not be getting any money from Starfleet. So we're going to stop again real quick here. There was another captain's log in here, and it says Captain's Log, Stardate 3248.9, so we've advanced a little bit in time. We are entrusted with the lives of an entire planet, and we have dishonored that trust. Only now has the enormity of our failure begun to reveal itself. That is a very, very horrible captain's log. I don't think Kirk would ever record something like that. Do you think he would do that, Craig?
Yeah, it seems like maybe something more he would say. I don't think he'd put it on the official record.
Yeah, that's probably true. Chris, what did you think?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I agree with Craig on that one.
Okay, so did the caves in this underground area remind you of the caves on the show, guys? I was immediately taken back to like, what are little girls made of when they're running around the caves? I half expected to see Lurch come out in a big robe.
Totally.
Yeah, a lot of stalagmites and stalactites, and the color schemes are pretty accurate as well. But I don't know, this whole sequence almost felt like a waste to me too, because there's so many more things they could have done with the technology on the Enterprise instead of beaming down and trying to take pot shots at the guy. You would think, I mean, you saw some really cool stuff in some previous issues where like Spock was using the transporter to make it look like he had magical powers. I mean, why couldn't they just beam the dude up to the Enterprise? Did you guys think about that?
Yeah, this whole sequence, yeah, I didn't care for it too much. And like the bad guy, he really comes across as this mustache twirling villain asking for his 100 million credits or whatever. And even his 2-bit cronies that are helping him out, like all these generic looking like guys and everything, and like the pink shirts and like blue pants or whatever with their helmets on. It's, oh man, oh boy. It's like how to be a supervillain 101 here.
Yeah.
Chris, did you detect any Harry Mudd-like qualities in Anzar?
Yes, there was a little bit of that, and I think that factors into my dislike for this character.
Oh no.
I had that feeling when you said mustache twirling. That's where you clued me in that you were honing in on some Harry Muddish.
Yeah, it was like weird. Like it was in like the back of my head, like the entire issue, kind of. And when I got to the end of the issue, I was like, "Yeah, I think that's why I didn't like this guy. Kind of reminded me of Harry Mudd."
So, Craig, overall thoughts on Anzar as a villain? Since we're on the topic.
I mean, I kind of like the idea of somebody who might be mentally unstable, and that's what sort of causes them to become villainous. But beyond that, hostage situations always kind of bother me because you get a ransom that's being asked for, and then there's really, the idea of whether or not you're going to pay it. And from a criminal standpoint, it doesn't really seem like the best play.
Agreed. And I think in the past, we've found that Kirk and Spock are not always the best hostage rescuers. They always seem to screw it up.
Yeah.
Any more thoughts before we move on?
No.
All right. So Spock is working with Anzar. He's telling him he has a plan to help him actually get some money. So he suggests, instead of trying to get money from Starfleet, that Anzar attempts to get the money from some of Styria's wealthiest citizens who are currently stored on the tape. And he surmises that they will pay to protect their world. So Anzar really likes this idea. So Spock offers to beam back up to the ship and steal the portable device that is used to restore the people from the recordings. So he's next aboard of the Enterprise. He's sneaking around. He knocks a guard unconscious, and he winds up finding this device and transporting back down to the planet into the cave with the device. So Anzar is very trusting of Spock at this point for some reason, which I couldn't figure out. And he lets Spock activate it, but instead of reanimating wealthy Styrians, he actually somehow manages to make Kirk pop out of the tape, followed by Scotty and several other Enterprise security guards. So Spock springs the trap on Anzar and says, "Shame on you," and asks Anzar if he's ever heard of the Trojan horse. So the Enterprise crew quickly overcomes the henchmen of Anzar, and they surrender. Anzar, though, is pretty slick, and he grabs a hold of a gun and the sphere that he's been protecting and starts to threaten to vaporize it yet again. So he tells the Enterprise crew to work the controls of the reanimation device and pull out the wealthy Styrians as they had promised to do earlier. Scotty takes a hold of the controls, and instead, of course, of making the rich people pop out, now the terrier dog from earlier on is also reanimated yet again, and the dog starts to attack Anzar quite viciously. And he is easily subdued after the dog has kind of pinned him to the ground. So Anzar is not very happy with this, and he's mumbling some threats under his breath and screaming. And Spock says goodbye to Allura, and on his way out calls her an uncommonly lovely woman and tells her that she made it very easy for him to pretend that he loved her. Kirk asks Scotty how he thought of the idea to bring the dog down, and Scotty says he didn't do it on purpose. He taped the dog earlier because he wanted to know how the captain felt about having pets on the ship, because there's a Starfleet rule that says you can't have animals on the ship. So the comedic moment at the end was Kirk threatening to have the dog served in the officers' mess hall. So we get to end on a humorous ending. So did you guys feel bad for the poor Enterprise crewmen that Spock beans on the head with his phaser. That poor guy didn't deserve that.
Yeah, again, it was another one of those Spock moments that it just didn't seem like something Spock would do. Goodness.
I agree. Now, wouldn't you think? I would think it would be much more effective just to stun the security guard instead of risking a serious injury by hitting the guy in the head.
Yeah, the thing is, it's one big setup anyway, because,
Exactly.
I mean, you have Kirk and Scotty and everyone getting shrunk and then coming back to full size. I mean, they're all in on it. It made no sense. So I guess maybe that's just part of a story he was telling, maybe, and it's made up. I don't know, it really doesn't make much sense.
Yeah, don't try and forgive bad writing, Chris.
Yeah. Yeah, I give up with this issue.
How dumb is Anzar that he falls for the same trick twice? He falls for Spock reanimating stuff, thinking he's going to reanimate the wealthy people, and Scotty and Kirk pop out, and then he trusts them again, and then they reanimate the dog. He falls for the same trick twice. It didn't make sense to me.
Well, greed will definitely cloud your mind.
I suppose it will.
I don't think this dude was playing with a full deck. So,
and I thought it was strange that they mentioned that no pets are permitted on board the Enterprise. I guess that's a rule that changed by the TNG era. So Data's allowed to have a cat, right? But you can't have a dog on the Enterprise.
Yeah, and Archer had one back on the old school Enterprise too. He had his
that's
dog.
right. Archer had the dog.
Yeah,
so I guess they outlawed dogs, and then I guess they let you have them again later. So we got the humorous ending, as opposed to the last issue where we had that really bizarre altercation between Scotty and Spock. But did you guys get a chuckle out of this ending?
It worked.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I thought it was all right. Yeah, nothing. I'm glad they went for the humorous ending, but it was.
Okay. So, any final thoughts on this issue, Craig Cohen? Where do you fall on the non-canon essential side?
I was so disappointed with this issue because they had really hit their stride, and I thought were really producing some interesting stories. And this issue to me just seemed like such a step backwards, and it was just really an action-based story that created beats that didn't really make sense when you thought about the characters, and it didn't even explore the really intriguing concept that they presented, which was the idea that you could sort of capture somebody's structure or cellular buildup or however they explained it on a biomagnetic tape.
Great comments. Chris, what are your final thoughts on this?
Yeah, I was disappointed as well. For a lot of the same reasons Craig mentioned. Yeah, especially you didn't really find out what was happening with the tape and all that. They could have explored that a bit more. And just after the last couple issues that I was able to read, it was just a big letdown. I mean, the last two issues took stories that I don't think I'd be interested in, and made them interesting and enjoyable. This issue didn't really do it for me.
All right, interesting. So I'm going to take a little more of a positive spin, and for all the issue's failings, I'm going to say that I did like that the author has kind of struck out again and tried to create some of his own new canon. And we saw things in this issue that we had never seen in Trek before, namely the inner workings of Starfleet. So we actually see something that's taking place at Starfleet. So we see this council, the Science Council meeting, and he introduces, even though they don't tell you what species they are, he does introduce two new different types of aliens that we haven't seen as a part of Starfleet. So I kind of like that. Although the issue itself is a little bit of a disappointment, I like that he's trying to forge at least a little bit of new ground here. So for that, I would give it a non-canon essential, just for those elements of the story.
Good point you made there, Jeff. Definitely give the issue a little bit more of a reason to exist.
Agreed. Chris, any final thoughts on that?
Yeah, you brought up some good points. I didn't really think about that. But, I think it's, in the end, something you can pass on and not miss too much.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of episode 98 of the Tricorder Transmissions, and we will be back with you next week. You can catch up with us at Facebook / the Tricorder Transmissions, TTT_pod on Twitter. And Craig, you are Mr. Craig Cohen on Twitter?
Yes, I still am Mr. Craig Cohen with an MR.
All right. And we welcome Chris Ritzer to Twitter. He has just started tweeting at us, so you can catch him at C Von Ritzer on Twitter. You can also, we tweeted at him, so if you want to find him, you can check our tweets, and his name will be listed in there. So, Chris, hopefully you'll join us in the conversations.
If I can figure out how to do it, I will do it.
We'll have to give Chris a crash course in Twitter.
I didn't even know what my Twitter name was, and it's good you were able to say it because I didn't even remember it.
All right. So thanks for everybody for tuning in, and we will see you again next week. Keep your eyes peeled. We are going to be recording the new episode of A Tavacron in the very near future, so that will be coming out soon. And Shore Leave is scheduled to be recorded in a couple of weeks, so we got a lot of good stuff coming down the pike.